Today I wanted to talk about something that a lot of INFPs are probably pretty familiar with, and that is being a writer. Usually, a lot of INFPs are interested in the arts, and this includes writing. So, one thing that I can describe myself as is a writer. So, I wanted to talk about what it's like to be an actual writer. Um, and there are two different kinds of writing that I've done so far. The first is writing for television news, and then the second is my career as a self published author of young adult books. So, first, I'll talk about five things that I experienced as I was working in the world of television news writing. Um, the first thing is, I never had enough money. I thought that when I started working as an associate producer for a news channel, that because of the title and because I was actually writing stuff that people would say on television, I just assumed that I would be paid, like a pretty good amount of money. But no, I did not make very much money at all. In fact, I had a cleaning job that I used to do before I worked for news, where I would clean people's houses. And I made more money doing that than working as an associate producer in a local television news channel. That said, I'm really glad I had that experience because it was a lot of fun. And that brings me to the second thing I learned as I worked in television news writing, and that was how awesome it is to hear someone else say something you've written. Because if you're a writer, you know that you write something and it's on a page and other people read it. And maybe you get a little, you get a little rush of excitement when you see someone read something you've written. You see them maybe enjoying one of your books or something, and that's awesome. But it's so different to hear someone say what you've written on television. It gives you a little buzz. It's awesome. So that was really fun to experience. Thirdly, it was also very humbling because as the news anchors would read some of the things that I'd written, I would hear the mistakes that I'd made in writing. And sometimes the anchors would politely point out my mistakes after they'd read them online. Not online, on air. So it was very humbling because I'd see how many mistakes I made in writing. Um, and those mistakes didn't just affect me, it made the news anchor look bad. So having someone else read your work out loud in front of an audience, it's a huge responsibility because you want to make that person look good. You want to make the station look good. Yeah, so it was super humbling, and it made me realize um, that I needed to work extra hard to make sure my writing was as flawless as possible. And it was never flawless, to be honest, never flawless. But yeah, it was a good experience. It helped me to learn a lot. The fourth thing I learned was that just because someone writes differently from me doesn't necessarily mean that their style is better than mine. It's just different. Um, because when you are a producer at a television news station, you work with lots of other producers, which means you're surrounded by writers. And also, the reporters are usually writers too. So you're surrounded by all these people who have all these different styles of writing. And you don't always agree on the way something should be written. But the more you work with other writers, you start to realize that no one's necessarily writing wrong. It's just that they have different voices and different styles. And before, when I wrote just books or like blog posts, even though I worked with critique partners who would critique my work, after getting a critique back, I always thought I was a bad writer. Always. And it's still hard to get that mindset out of me. um, but working in news helped me to see I'm not a bad writer. It's just that I have my own voice, just like everyone else does. So the difference in when I wrote books and a critique partner would get back to me with a suggested edit for some part of my book, I would read what they wrote and think to myself, oh, so this must be way better than what I wrote. It probably is. I'm a terrible writer. But in the news industry, when I would write something and then a reporter would say it on air, it might get back to me that another producer heard what I'd written and they made fun of it. And then someone else who was also a writer would say, no, you didn't write anything wrong. It's just that their style is different from yours. So it took me hearing that on multiple occasions from multiple different people that it's okay for different writers to write differently. Just like it's okay for different people to look differently. It doesn't mean that one person is uglier than the next. It just means that they look different. Same thing with writing. So that was a very cool thing to learn. Excuse me. The fifth thing that I learned from working in television news was that I had to be creatively adaptive or adaptable. Because things would change so frequently in a newsroom. Like, in 1 hour, a whole bunch of things could change. Like, for example, let's say that there was a shooting that happened 30 minutes ago, and that was the top story of the day. So the very first thing that I needed to write in the script was about the shooting. And I needed to make sure that that story sounded good. But then, like, maybe 10 minutes before we go on air, I've got the whole script done. 10 minutes before we go on air, someone gets in a huge car accident, and that becomes a top story. Oh, and also, the shooting story completely changed. It turns out it wasn't a shooting. It was like, let's say, someone just passed out, and the rumors of the shooting were widely exaggerated. So we'd have to change everything, like change that whole news story and move it from being the top story of the hour to a little further down on the list. So that meant having to be adaptive or able to adapt to the changing situation very quickly and to use my skills as a writer to do that. And that was difficult for me, especially towards the beginning of working there, because I was so nervous. I wanted everything to be perfect. So I would come in like extra early to work to get started on these news stories, which didn't really make that much of a difference because 5 minutes before the show started and we were on air, things could change on a dime. And it didn't matter how early I got there, you just have to be ready to change with everything at the last minute. So you just have to be like on top of stuff and be able to adapt quickly, which is really good practice for a writer. It helps you not to become too precious about your work. Be willing to, you know how they say kill your darlings? You have to be willing to like kill entire paragraphs and write completely new things and not get too attached to your own work. And not take yourself too seriously too. I would say that's probably like a huge thing that I learned overall from working in television news is that if you take yourself too seriously, you'll end up hurting yourself and other people. Because I did notice like sometimes I would fall into that trap where not necessarily with my writing, because I never thought I was a good writer. So when I'd hear other people like say, oh, she did that writing was terrible, which I worked with some pretty mean people. So they would say things like that. When I heard that, it didn't really hurt my feelings because I wasn't super attached to my writing. But as far as taking myself too seriously, when it came to the way people conduct themselves, which is a whole different topic, that I realized I need to chill out. Like, one thing I definitely learned from working there is, because like I said, I worked with some pretty rude people. And just because some people are very rude, like they don't care, like they don't really care if they hurt other people. They just don't care. That really, really, really bothered me. And it made me absolutely determined not to befriend those people, to stay as far away as possible from people who showed even in like an iota of being that way, because there was like a group of people there who were like that. And anyone who even just a little bit associated with them, I was like, nope, not going to talk to you. I don't want to be like you. And I think that's one thing I learned. That can turn into becoming too judgmental. Like if I take myself so seriously that it makes me become judgmental of people, then that's like a waste of time and energy. Yeah, so that went a little bit over into other things other than writing, but that is what I learned from working in television news as a writer. Um, it was a very humbling experience, and I'm really glad that I got to do it. Um, yeah, it was. I enjoyed it for the most part. Now, about what it's like to work as an author of young adult books, particularly a self-published author. Well, it is a lot of fun. I have some of the most fun writing when I'm writing one of my young adult novels, because I get to write about things that have personal meaning to me. No one's telling me I have to write about, a shooting or a murder or um, like now I work as a social media producer, so I'm told I have to write about this or I have to write a blog post about this camera or whatever. And I don't really have much interest in those subjects. So when I get to write about like adventure on another planet or, a love story or something just fun, something that I came up with out of my own brain, that is like, there's no feeling that compares to that for me. It's like eating cheesecake, except you are also Supergirl. So you're flying while you're eating cheesecake. So it's just amazing to write and get in the zone and get lost in your work. Another way that I would describe my experience as a self-published young adult author is I still have no money because it's extremely expensive to self-publish. Oh my goodness. My next book, to be perfectly blunt, my next book is already written. I have a cover for it. It's done. It's been written and ready to put out there for about 2 months now, maybe a little longer, but I can't because I'm trying to save up just enough money for one last little tweak, but I have to pay someone. It's the formatting of the book that needs to be tweaked. I have to pay someone to format this book for me, and I have to save up the money to do that so that they can format it, and then I can upload the book to Amazon and it can be ready for people to buy. So yeah, it takes so much patience to have to like save up the money needed to self-publish every single book that I write. Um, and yeah, I know some people say that they self-publish their books for free, but I don't see how that's possible. And to still come out with a book that's of good quality, because you have to pay someone to edit your book. You have to have an editor. And if you want a decent editor, unless you're super lucky, you have to pay them. And usually that costs about 500, well, like maybe $400 or at least $400. So it's a good chunk of change. And then there's other things too, like graphic designers, you have to pay them, the book formatter, then marketing and advertising, you need to put at least a little bit of money into that. So it's just so expensive. And the only reason that someone would do this is because they really love writing. You have to love it, or else you will abandon it. The third thing that I experienced as an author of young adult books is that I found it very relaxing and a way of building my self-worth as a human being. Being an INFP, I struggle with self-esteem issues a lot. That's probably one of my biggest flaws as a person. Um, but writing and publishing books it makes me feel like, okay, I can do this. Um, like when I see my book online, or when I get, on a few occasions that I've gotten like a fan letter, a fan email from someone who enjoyed my book, that made me feel like I did something that makes my existence have meaning. Um, and it's very easy to feel the opposite of that when you are an INFP, because you're scared to put yourself out there. You're scared that because you have such big feelings and such big emotions that you're going to scare people off. So you keep quiet most of the time. And the few times that you do reveal yourself to people, like at least in my experience, a few times that I have revealed myself to people and like been honest about myself and gotten close to people as of late, it turned out to be the wrong person, and I got my feelings really hurt and yada yada, and it made my self-esteem take a like a little nosedive. So one thing that has helped to fix that is continuing to write and self-publish, because it's a way for me to express who I really am without having to worry about being hurt. Of course, there are people who read my books and who hate them, who point out the grammatical errors that I didn't catch, um, and who don't like the plots. There are plenty of people like that, or people who just ignore my work. And I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that, because I feel like that's just what happens when you're any kind of artist. You put your work out there for critics and for people who will allow themselves to be inspired by it. You put your work out there for both of those people. And that's the way it should be, because everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So the critics don't bother me that much. But yeah, so it is, I'd say overall, being a writer is a really, really healthy and good thing for me personally. And I think if you are an INFP and you're considering getting into the writing game, I encourage you to give it a shot, because it helps you to discover a lot about yourself. And if you do decide to publish your work as a writer, it's a great way to boost your self-esteem, to accomplish something and see other people enjoying the fruits of your accomplishment. Like they get to read your book and fall into the universe that you've created through your book. So it's a way of giving a little bit of yourself to the world. And it's really fun too. So if you would like to look at some of the things that I've written, my book series that is available now is called the South Louisiana High Book Series, and I write under a pen name. It's E.J. Mara. And I'll put a link to the series website in the YouTube description box. So if you want to visit the website, it's a lot. I'll warn you about that. Yeah. You'll see that I did like create a whole little universe in my head and then try to put it in this website and make little books about the universe. So it's going to be a lot if you decide to visit it, but go for it if you want to. All right. Well, thank you for watching. And if you are deciding that you're going to write a book, good luck and enjoy yourself. And tell me how it goes, because I would love to connect with other writers and see what your writing experience is like. All right, bye.